Imagine you're living thousands of years ago with no instruction manual, no internet, no poison control center. You're hungry. You see a berry. It looks delicious. Do you eat it? Because if you guess wrong, you might be dead in the next few hours. So, how did ancient humans figure out which plants would kill them and which ones wouldn't? The answer is way darker and way more fascinating than you probably think. Let's start with the obvious question: trial and error. Yes, literally. Ancient humans ate plants, and some of them died. A lot of them probably died. But here's the thing that most people get wrong about this process: it wasn't totally random. Ancient humans weren't just blindly shoving every plant they found into their mouths and hoping for the best. There was actually method to this madness. First, they used their senses. Before eating something new, they'd smell it, they'd look at it closely, they'd touch it to their skin to see if there was an immediate reaction. Some plants are poisonous enough that just touching them causes irritation. Stinging nettles do this. Poison ivy does this. So if a plant made your skin burn just from touching it, congratulations, you've learned a valuable lesson without dying. Then came the real test. They'd put a tiny piece in their mouth but wouldn't swallow. They'd taste it and spit it out. Bitter taste was a major red flag. Why? Because many toxic plants are intensely bitter. Your body's natural response to bitterness is disgust and rejection. That reflex exists for a reason. Plants evolved to taste bad on purpose to stop animals from eating them. It's a defense mechanism. So if something tasted horrible, ancient humans learned to avoid it. But here's where it gets darker. Sometimes the warnings didn't work. Someone would swallow the poison, and what happened next? Other people watched. They observed the symptoms. This is crucial. Ancient humans became incredibly skilled at recognizing the effects of different poisons because they literally saw people die from them repeatedly. They noticed patterns. If someone ate this plant, they'd vomit. If someone ate that plant, they'd get a high fever. If someone ate another plant, they'd collapse and stop breathing. Tribal knowledge would spread. Don't eat the one that killed Grok. Eat the other one if you want to heal your wounds. Over time, every community built up an extensive mental database of plants. Which ones healed you? Which ones killed you? Which ones did weird things to your mind? And here's something most people don't realize. Ancient humans weren't just passively waiting for people to get poisoned. They were also actively testing these plants on animals first. Anthropologists have found evidence suggesting that hunter-gatherers would feed suspicious plants to dogs or other animals and watch what happened. If the animal died, the plant went on the no-eat list. This is essentially the first animal testing. It was crude and harsh, but it worked. There's also something called the universal edibility test, which is actually how survival experts today figure out whether an unknown plant is safe. You touch it to your skin. You put it on your lips. You put a tiny bit on your tongue. You swallow a small piece. Then you wait hours between each step to see if there's a reaction. This method actually mirrors what ancient humans seemed to do naturally. They had an instinctive understanding that you test plants slowly and carefully. But ancient humans had one huge advantage we often overlook. They were incredibly observant. They watched animals eat plants. Birds, monkeys, deer, all of these creatures were basically running the experiment for humans. If you see a bird eating a berry safely, that's valuable information. Ancient humans learned that certain animals could eat certain plants that were poisonous to humans, and they learned the reverse too. They noticed that some animals avoided plants that humans could safely eat. There's also the factor of preparation. Some plants are poisonous raw but safe when cooked. Cassava is the classic example. Raw cassava contains cyanide compounds. Cooked cassava is a staple food in many parts of the world. Ancient humans figured this out. They probably discovered it by accident at first, but over generations the knowledge stuck. This knowledge would be passed down from parent to child, from elder to younger generation. Your grandmother knew how to prepare cassava safely, so you learned from her. And we can't forget about intuition and basic biology. Human taste buds are actually pretty good at detecting certain poisons. Your body naturally rejects things that are bad for you when they're concentrated enough. Kids instinctively won't eat things that taste too bitter. This is an evolutionary trait. Our ancestors who didn't like bitter tastes survived longer because many bitter plants are toxic. Natural selection basically built a poison detector into our mouths. Geographic knowledge mattered too. Different regions had different plants. A community living in one area would know those plants inside and out. They'd know every edible plant, every medicinal plant, and every deadly plant in their territory. If someone traveled to a new region, they'd have to start learning again. This is why indigenous communities in different parts of the world developed completely different plant knowledge. The plants were different, the learning process was the same, but the results were unique to each place. It's also worth mentioning that shamans and medicine people played a huge role. These individuals were often the ones who experimented the most with plants. They'd try different plants, study their effects, and develop expertise. Some of them died, that's part of the job description, but the ones who survived became incredibly knowledgeable. They were like the pharmacists of the ancient world. People trusted them because they had hands-on experience with hundreds of plants. Here's another mind-bending part of this story. Ancient humans might have even understood the concept of dosage without understanding chemistry. They noticed that some plants were fine in small amounts but deadly in large amounts. They learned to use plants like digitalis in tiny, careful doses for medical purposes. They didn't know it contained cardiac glycosides. They just knew that a small amount helped your heart and a large amount stopped it forever. The cultural transmission of this knowledge was absolutely critical. Ancient humans didn't just learn through personal experience, they learned through teaching. Stories, warnings, demonstrations, all of this knowledge was carefully passed down. This is why oral cultures could maintain incredibly complex information about plants for thousands of years. A person born today in certain indigenous communities could name and describe the properties of hundreds of plants because of this unbroken chain of knowledge transmission. And let's talk about the mistakes, because there were plenty of them. Throughout history, humans have poisoned themselves with plants, sometimes fatally. Entire families have died from misidentifying plants. The history of human-plant interaction is written partly in human graves, but every death was a lesson. Every mistake was absorbed into collective knowledge. The process also involved some lucky breaks. Accidental discoveries played a role. Someone might have cooked a plant differently by chance and discovered a new preparation method. Someone might have mixed a poisonous plant with something else and found that the combination was safe. These happy accidents would be remembered and replicated. Modern anthropology has actually taught us that ancient humans had sophisticated botanical knowledge that would put many modern people to shame. There are indigenous communities alive today that maintain plant knowledge passed down for tens of thousands of years. They can tell you instantly whether a plant is edible, medicinal, or deadly. They can tell you how to prepare it. This isn't magic, it's the result of countless generations of careful observation, testing, and knowledge transfer. And here's the thing that connects all of this together. Every culture that survived long enough to become established had to solve this problem. They had to figure out which plants were safe. Different cultures came up with slightly different methods and reached slightly different conclusions, but the underlying principle was the same: careful testing, observation, and knowledge sharing. So when you ask how ancient humans knew which plants were poisonous, the answer isn't one thing. It was a combination of biological instinct, careful observation, dangerous testing, animal observation, generational knowledge transfer, and a healthy dose of trial and error. It was a system that worked well enough to keep humans alive for hundreds of thousands of years. And honestly, in a world without Google or scientists, that's pretty incredible. The next time you pick a wild berry or eat a plant you're not completely sure about, remember that every ancestor you have survived this process. They figured it out so you wouldn't have to.